ITF presentation, as I mentioned in my introduction, this presentation will be about sparring in Taekwondo. I put it together a few years ago when I was the head of the ITF Scientific Research Committee and head of the World Taekwondo Education Center in South Korea. When you ask people, what do you visualize when you talk about Taekwondo sparring, most of the answers you have that they see two people dressed up in kind of white uniforms, moving, punching, kicking, moving around the square mat. Actually, this doesn't really represent the sparring, because usually people connotate this with the sports sparring, which is even not the right type of sparring and not even a definition of Taekwondo. What sparring is, based on the General Choice Encyclopedia definition, this is a physical application of attack and defense techniques gained from patterns and or from fundamental movements performed against actual moving opponent or opponents under various situations. So when you basically look at the sports sparring, there are no such techniques like from fundamental movements, which we have stances, whatever, involved. Therefore, I'm going to talk about 3step sparring, focusing on 3step sparring, and the pictures, there'll be a picture of my former students from Australia, my black belts who've been very successful in international and national arena. So in my presentation, I will be talking about the Taekwondo circle and classification of ITF sparring, then emphasize the importance of fundamental movements, 3step sparring procedure, how to perform this procedure, variations of 3step sparring depends on circumstances, and at the end I will summarize this with advantages of 3step sparring training. Taekwondo circle basically summarizes the whole essence of Taekwondo, where when you start Taekwondo practicing, we start with the fundamental movements. Then the movements that become combinations, which are patterns. Then patterns, which is the physical application of movements in space orientation, give us preparation for different type of sparring. Then while performing sparring, we condition our attacking and defensive tools through Dalion, and then practice having all of the skills gained. We try to utilize them in the self-defense. If something doesn't work, we go back to the fundamentals and just go through the circle again. So this is basically a never-ending story in terms of practice. So today I'm going to speak about and actually a very specific type of sparring. As you can see from this diagram, there are a few types of sparring in Taekwondo, but I would like to focus today on 3step sparring. So 3step sparring is initial basic sparring exercise by the beginner, based on the Encyclopedia of Taekwondo between 9 and 6 cup. However, with the more advanced practitioners, with having more advanced techniques, there is also a chance and a good exercise to perform 3step sparrings utilizing other techniques, more advanced. 3step sparring utilizes attack and defense techniques, mainly deliver with the hands, middle and high, and foot low level. 3step sparring performed while stepping forward and backwards, so we are moving in two directions, and as a consequence, we can distinguish two methods of practice, one way and two way. When you look at these two practitioners, they are more or less of the same height, and then there's the importance of emphasizing the correctness of fundamental techniques. Here the girl on the left is presenting walking stance middle punch, and the girl on the right walking stance inner forearm middle block. Here the parameters and positions and facing should be in a way that the knuckles of the attacking tool are lined up or create vertical line with the toes or middle toe of the foot. The same situation happens with the defensive. So having this situation like this, in order to block defense correctly, we need to overlap our attacking tools correctly as well. When you look at the picture below, this is the rough representation of the width of the stance and the length of the stances. So this is the diagrammatic representation with 4 pictures, how the position of the attacker and defenders are, and then when you overlap feet correctly halfway, then there's a correct distance of the to perform the three-step sparring with the partner. When you look at this pictures, then you also look at the overlapping of feet and arms, and then checking whether it's correct foot overlapping or not is one of the important aspects. Three-step sparring procedure can be performed initially alone. So students practice fundamental movements, making sure that their stances are correct. And then when instructors are happy with their stances, then they can try to implement the three-step sparring procedure, but not yet in a sense of working together and overlapping, but being positioned apart. So like in the picture number 1, 2 practitioners standing apart, maintain attention stance, they bow, and the attacker takes a step back, performing walking stance low block, and shouting "yeah," which means I am ready to attack. The other person maintains, brings a left foot outside, creating parallel ready stance, and shouts "yeah, I am ready to defend." And then the procedure three-step sparring starts. 1 step, 2nd step, attackers moves forward, the defender moves backward. After the 3rd step, the defender performs a counter attack with the shout. Then if we are very confident with the procedure and stances, then we can perform three-step sparring while overlapping our feet and being kind of in contact. So partners face each other in the attention position, then they bow, and then the attacker measures the distance, basically measures the length of the distance. And please look that the attackers are, the partners are more of the same height. When the measurement, the length of the stance is satisfactory, the attacker takes step back, maintains a walking stance low block, shouting "yeah," which means I'm ready to attack. The defender does, as in the previous situation, steps towards the left, parallel ready stance, and says "yeah, I'm ready to defend." And then they perform 3 steps while attacking and defending respectively. At the end, the defender performs a reverse punch as a counter attack with shouting at the same time. And they come back to the original position. After the completion of three-step sparring, defenders actually, the partners get together in the opposite direction, then they perform the sparring. And if everything is satisfactory, then they continue the two-way combination, which means that after the completion of counter attack, then the partner starts moving in the opposite direction. So, which means the attacker moves backward while attacking, and the defender moves forward while defending. There are some variations of three-step sparring because in Taekwondo there's quite specific parameters of the body facing, height, positions, and so on, in order to perform techniques correctly and maintaining proper balance and other parameters. So here in this picture we have an attacker on the left hand side performing high attack and the defender performing high block with outer forearm. Because of that blocking tool and the distance is very different, and in this particular situation the feet overlap fully because the defender is performing block with his inner forearm, outer forearm. Here in the similar situation, but this time the defender used the high block and utilized different tool, which is knife hand. Therefore, the knife hand is positioned a little bit further away from his body, and consequently the feet have to overlap halfway instead of fully. With this scenario, when we have an attack with high block, with a high punch and the block, a rising block, then in order to perform and block correctly, then the knees of the partners have to overlap. So there are a few examples of the situation. Now, what happens when there are differences in height between the performing partners? Well, this is the situation that the tall person has a longer stances and the shorter person and also has a shorter stances. Therefore, if the two partners perform 3-step sparring and they are of different heights, they cannot perform the same stance. In the bottom left picture, you can see a girl performing walking stance middle punch, whereas defender who is taller performs L stance inner forearm block. In that case, this is kind of acceptable and correct. The picture, second picture at the bottom, the girl performs sitting stance, knife and strike. The defender who is taller performs L stance, inner forearm inward block. If the height of practitioners is very considerably different, then they cannot perform 3-step sparring together. Therefore, they need to perform individually. I presented in this picture quite extreme heights, but it relates to the people who are significantly taller or smaller. In summary, the advantages of 3-step sparring are: it's the first type of sparring practiced by the beginners, so this is the actual introduction to sparring. 3-step sparring helps the understanding of Taekwondo techniques better. When practiced with partners, helps develop right timing and correct stances, maximizes students' improvement, techniques, distance, angle, control, tool and target, develops self-confidence and trust between partners through constant repetition, gives very strong base of students who enjoy performing and competing in patterns. The variety of techniques in Taekwondo as well as the number of options available in 3-step sparring can make it a fun exercise under the eye of knowledgeable instructor who has a large dose of imagination. And finally, combined with the acting and music, dynamic and well synchronized 3-step sparring combinations performed by a group of students can be enjoyable to watch in Taekwondo demonstration. In my opinion, first steps in life equal 3-step sparring in Taekwondo. I hope that this presentation helps you to understand this very basic and very important procedure, and happy training everybody. Thank you and Taekwondo.